Especially companies like Airbus, Boeing, who are, aircraft manufacturers, they own the data. And there are certain kinds of data which nobody else in the world owns.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Nodes of Design. To help support our mission spread knowledge, we have a very special guest on today's episode. Let's welcome Nancy Kumar, a design practitioner with a decade of experience in user experience and design strategy. Currently, she is working as a strategic design manager at Airbus and previously worked with Boeing, Honeywell Aerospace, Samsung, and Tata Elxsi. In this episode, Nancy had shared great insights on design in aviation. We had discussed on what is the process of designing for aircraft and how are design decisions taken in these complex systems. And we also spoke on how is data from aircraft used to generate design strategies and how usability and user experience is tested out in such complex systems like cockpit dashboards, pilot piece of equipment, and other equipments used in the aircraft. In the end, we discussed on how to identify key insights and opportunity areas to prepare a design strategy. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and on every Friday we release new episodes with different creative leaders from around the world to help you better understand different concepts related to design. So don't forget to tune in into Notes of Design every Friday. With that being said, happy designing everyone. Hi Nancy, welcome to Nodes of Design. It's a pleasure hosting you today on our show.
Thank you. I think you're doing a great job here, and it's my pleasure to be here on your show. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So how was your day?
It's begin, I would say. And yeah, it's the way it is going on with being at home and, working from home. So that's how life has been. But yeah, going on good.
Thank you, Nancy. So if you could give a brief about yourself to our audience out there.
Okay. So, I am Nancy Kumar and I'm working as a strategic designer with Airbus currently. And I would say I've been associated with the design industry or working as a UX professional in design industry for almost more than 9 years. And and I've got some formal education on design from NID and Domus Academy. So that's about myself overall.
That's wonderful, Nancy. So what was your journey into design and how did you start? What are your tips to the beginners on how to start?
Okay. So again, the journey, I guess, for most of the design aspirants, especially in India, is very interesting. So I can maybe talk about myself. So I wanted to pursue my career in design. This was back in 2007. And I was not very sure on, what to do in design because the only major perception in India about design was associated to fashion industry, but there was nothing more that people knew about it. And especially people coming from two-tier city, it was not a well-known thing. But then gradually I got to know about NIFT, NID, and then, my interest area, I was mainly interested on what NID was offering as disciplines. And that's when I started preparing for the course. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to crack the exam and I started my, I would say, a formal education or graduation with NID doing product design. So that's about the graduation. And I worked for a few years after my graduation. I was working with Samsung R&D. I worked with Honeywell Aerospace. That was the first time I was working with the aviation company. And then I thought, okay, maybe we need to explore more around what design has to offer in the world. And I wanted to explore this design education, and I was interested in interaction design. I did my post-graduation with Domus Academy in Italy. And that's about the journey. And tips for, I would say, for the beginners would be, because at this age, we are in 2021, design is sort of a mainstream career now. A lot of people know about it. And one more thing is because, a lot of people want to do design because it's in the market. So please don't go what's in the market, because this discipline is a very redundant discipline. Today, it is, it's in demand. People really want to, pursue their career with it, but tomorrow it might not be. So look into your passion, look what really interests you, and then choose the discipline. And of course, market and the demand that goes on with what you do. So yeah.
That's wonderful, Nancy. Thank you so much. So you've been in this aviation field for quite a while. So let's talk about design in aviation. So what is the process of designing for aircraft and how are the design decisions taken for these complex systems?
So talking about design in aviation or designing an aircraft, I would like to maybe begin with talking about what are the different aspects of design. So one is designing a physical aircraft in itself. Other is designing the services around the aircrafts and the stakeholders involved in managing those, managing the aircraft and the system around it. So I would say I'm mainly involved in the digital services or the services provided around this aircraft. So if you must be aware, we have airports, we have aircraft managed by, flying by pilots. There are multiple stakeholders involved in this system, and the stakeholders, again, as a domain, it's a quite a complicated domain, same as how complicated the aircraft is within itself. Yeah, as in it's more of a system level design, I would say. And yeah, and to manage an aircraft from the birth till the death of an aircraft, that is what the design, like, that is where I am currently working today. That's what I could say about the designing of an aircraft. But yeah, talking more about decision for complex system, again, the complexity of an interface of a cockpit, or managing end to end life cycle of an aircraft. Again, the interface is complicated here, the system is complicated here, and that is what we want to manage. And the decision is highly dependent on whom are you really designing it for. In the design thinking process, we mainly talk about catering to particular persona. So in aviation industry, when you cater to one persona, you have to think of 10 other personas around, because that particular users or that particular persona's decision making depends on each other, because it's a contributing or a collaborative system kind of a thing. So I would say it's you need to look at the end to end journey of the persona, the stakeholders, and then design. And it's a highly business driven field, so the design needs to be justifiable.
So how is the data from aircraft used to generate these design strategies?
That's a very interesting question. And so, yeah, one thing I would like to share here, data is everything here, as in, especially when you talk about an aviation industry, and especially the way it is evolving day by day, and the kind of services that we are giving. And especially companies like Airbus, Boeing, who are, aircraft manufacturers, they own the data. And there are certain kinds of data which nobody else in the world owns, because, they're the owner of the aircraft, manufacturer of the aircraft. And then comes the opportunity for these companies to give services around these data. So I can say mostly it starts with looking at the opportunities. So as a company, as a manufacturer, aircraft manufacturer, I have some set of data, but then how do I use it? That is where I have to look for the opportunities. And then we look at the customers, or we look at the personas that we really want to work on, or want to, try their, solve their problem statements or something around it. So that is where I say data plays a very big role. Without data and giving a services around it, it would be something really challenging in today's world.
Thank you, Nancy. So how are the usability and user experience tested out in these complex systems like cockpit dashboards and other pilot piece of equipment? What kind of usability techniques are being followed here?
So again, that's a very interesting thing, because aviation, the cockpit, and the way pilot is flying, the cognitive load of pilot, it's a very complex environment to to work on. To give a brief history about it, way before we had user experience, or way before we had UX design, there was something called human factors in the aviation industry. And human factors was a sort of, I would say, a specialized field where the person had a knowledge of human abilities and limitation, and based on that knowledge, lot of things were designed. So something very close to the what we talk about ergonomics, but yeah, this is something little more than that. And since then, the usability aspect has been taken care of. The human factors specialist actually looks into the cognitive part. They look into the spatial orientation, mental workload, blah blah blah. And that is what this has been. This has been area that has people have been looking into it. And user experience is something, I would say, or the usability part of it, as the term, it has been introduced to people quite recently. So I would say it has been their part of aviation industry. And how is it done? So let me take an example of a pilot. So when pilot is flying, so there are multiple, I would say, touch points for him while flying. So he has a cockpit with a very, very, very complicated interface, I would say, or very complicated touch points, the multiple tasks that he need to do. There could be, things that he wants to, there are a lot of factors. I would talk about pilot in specific when we talk about the usability aspect of it. So, if we look at the pilot, they are working in a very complex environment. They are dealing with the very complex interfaces, or a cockpit, I would say, the environment they are in. So, they have to work long hours, sit just sitting in the flight, operating the cockpit or the aircraft. And again, there are a lot of things which comes into the consideration. Looking at the pilot, no pilot, if I have to, talk about the usability aspect of it, considering pilot as one of the persona, you have to look at multiple things like, what is his psychological impact, what is his cognitive load. And when we design solution for pilot, so again, just to give you an example, if we have to look at the fuel usage of an aircraft, okay, so that is one consideration, that okay, he need to fly the aircraft with optimal fuel usage, and how does he keep that in mind every time? And that is one of the things, that's just one of the things that he has to keep in mind with other 10 aspects. So you have to again consider the environment, you have to consider the UI. So basically, if you're designing a digital interface, you need to look at the light aspect of it. Is it too bright outside there in the cockpit, or is it too dark outside there? At what time do you have to give the prompt to the pilot, to fly at more optimal level with the fuel usage? At what time? So at the initial part of when the pilot is flying, he might be very busy, but at the I would say somewhere aircraft when is that at cruise, that might be the good time where his psychological impact will not be very high. So there are a lot of things that needs to be considered. So again, I would say, to begin with, you look at the journey, you look at the technical aspect of flying, and again, it depends for user to users. But yeah, as in the overall, this is what it matters to look into the usability aspect.
So, Nancy, how to identify key insights and opportunity areas?
So actually, I would say that's one of the key activities that I do as a strategic designer. So just to give a brief of what I actually do. As a part of in an innovation team of an Airbus, what we do is we look at the different stakeholders that are involved. We look at the stakeholders. We look at the different customers who are in working closely with Airbus. And the main thing as a designer, what we do is I have to identify the I would say problem areas of particular persona. So it doesn't start with the persona per se, it starts with the business area that we are looking into. And that business area has different personas, and that is where I start digging further, looking into, what do they do, and then what's their journey, and then what's the problem that they're facing today. So that is where I get the problem statement, which helps me to derive or come to an opportunity area. And I would say that opportunity, again, it's just the one step towards finding the opportunity area. That's not just the end. Like again, in an innovation team, it's not that as a designer I work alone. I have a business focal working with me, I have a technical focal working with me. That opportunity area is validated based on other two aspects, which is the business viability part of it and the technical feasibility of it. And that's when we go ahead with identified the opportunities and the insights. So I would say research, and then talking to the customers, and then and we validate. So that's how it is.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for all these wonderful insights. So could you please share with us, how does your typical day look like? Any interesting stories?
Okay. Yeah, I can again. I've already mentioned few of this, but yeah, let me talk about it. So, as I mentioned, I'm part of an innovation team with Airbus, and as a strategic designer, we look at the whole picture or at a system level from the customer point of view. So, again, and we have a very well-defined framework, which is highly inspired from the design thinking framework that we follow for the innovation. And I would say it is partially design-driven innovation kind of a method that we do. So, again, it begins with talking to the end users, talking to the stakeholders persona, identify what they're doing currently, understand their scenarios, understand their ways of working, their journey, identify the pain points, find out the opportunities, talk to the customers. Yeah, due to the pandemic, we are not really able to go to on site, whether. So one of the examples I would say, so there are a few maintenance engineer, or there are a few engineers who look into tech representative we call. So they are the people who are actually working on site, inspect the aircraft, involves in the maintenance of an aircraft. That's very interesting aspect. And when we have to design for them, so just for example, if we think of the first solution that comes to everybody's mind is, okay, make a web based solution for these stakeholders, but that might not be the best thing, because they're barely in front of computers or laptop. How do we even think of that? As in, you have to think of the real ways of working. We don't even know if a tablet would also be a perfect way, because tablet still has a big real estate, and it's still something which is heavy to handle. So a mobile based application or whatever. So these are the decision making criterias, and it's very important or interesting that way. So that's what I'm saying. Due to the pandemic, I have been not been able to go to them and see them, but we are having our remote research and remote interviews going on, workshops with them to identify all. So as I mentioned, these are the activities. And when I talk about some interesting stories, I'll just again, it's obviously related to the aviation industry and designing. One of the interesting thing that I came across is, so we have been working on one pilot solution. So I was working on the pilot solution. I had read through, done all the research around pilot, did all studying about his journey. Okay, this is the activity that he wants to perform. What all things does he need to do? Did end-to-end journey, starting from he starts from his home, getting to the airport, sits at the aircraft, operates the cockpit, blah blah blah. And then again, as previously I had mentioned, he has to monitor the fuel usage. And before getting onboarded to aircraft, how much amount of fuel is needed? It was around this. And then later, when it was a stage where we were validating the concepts, or I would say, yeah, it was more of a concept validation with the customer. We realized the same activity is done by some other profile. So basically, based on the region, the same activity can differ. So basically, if you're making one solution, it might not be the same persona. The persona can also differ. Usually what happens, same set of persona can perform two different activities, but this was a very interesting scenario where one activity was done by two different personas. So in the US side, it was more of a dispatcher who do that activity, but in the Europe region, it was more of a pilot who does that act. So that was a very interesting, I would say, learning or experience that I'd had. So yeah.
Thank you, Nancy, for all these wonderful insights. So we'll conclude this show by you recommending 3 favorite books of yours and also people who inspire you the most in this space.
It's a little difficult question, the second part of it, but yeah, let me begin with talking about the books. Maybe I can talk about two important books. One that I have been recently, I would say, reading was Managing Strategic Design. So that's by Ray Holland. It talks about the strategic design part of the design. How do you manage design? How is strategy being performed by design? A design driven innovation or a design driven organization per se. Like if you see in the corporate world, or if you see in any of the organization, design is more of a deliverable, or it's more of a, I would say, a framework. That is the level that we have reached. But design has not reached at that level where a organization is driven by a design. So that is where that book is very interesting, and I would highly recommend that. And the second book, I guess it is more for beginners or design aspirants, is Emotional Design. I guess a lot of people must have heard about it. It's by Don Norman, and it talks about the emotional aspect of design. So a lot of people, when we talk about user experience, we just talk about, okay, defining or giving an experience to the customer, but it is something really more than that. Okay, we as a designer, we are designing an experience, we are designing a product or service, but while the user is using that service or product, what are the emotional aspect that he's going through? And if you're successful managing those emotions, then I would say the design is really successful, what you have designed. So yeah, these were the two things. And coming from the people point of view, again, because I've been closely working in aviation industry, and design is, I would say, is comparatively not that known field, because we've had a product design aspect of it, but a service system or a digital design is still comparatively very new, because it's a legacy thing that has been going on, and to change that, it takes a lot of time. So from people point of view, I can just say that people have been closely working within my organizations, and where I can learn more about the domain and about aviation. Those are the ones who they really inspired me, because people have been working in this industry, have been working for more than 2 decades. Like literally, I've seen people like that. So yeah, it's really a big thing, and yeah, good to experience.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for all these wonderful insights. So we are looking forward to host you again in our upcoming episodes. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. All the best for the great work you're doing. It's really nice to see all inspiring people talking about their experiences, sharing their knowledge. It's really great. Thank you for